Potions can be very helpful, but brewing a lot of them is a pain. Today I'll show you how to build this machine behind me that automatically brews potions and stops automatically when the storage is full or it runs out of water bottles. I'll show you how to build it first, then I'll explain how it works and explain some of the limitations of this contraption. Let's get started on the build. The material list is in the video description, but here's a shot of it here as well. The first thing we'll do is place our output storage. This can be a chest, a barrel, or even a shulker box. Next, let's add a hopper behind the chest and add a brewing stand on top of the hopper. Then add a hopper pointing into the brewing stand and a double chest on top. This will be used to feed water bottles into the system. Add a couple of blocks under the chest and add a lever to the top block. This lever is what's going to allow you to turn the system on and off. Now it's time to build a control system. I'll explain how it all works when we're done with the build. First, add a hopper pointing into the top of the brewing stand. Add 2 blocks behind the brewing stand and 2 blocks on the ground behind the water bottle hopper. Place a repeater pointing into this hopper, set it to 4 ticks, and then add a line of redstone dust behind it. Place a comparator pointing into the hopper above the brewing stand and add a block in front of the comparator. Then add a redstone torch to the side of that block. This should light up the redstone and the repeater that points into the water bottle system. Now, before we go on to the next step, I have to point out that I make this mistake all the freaking time. This comparator that we have pointing into the hopper above the brewing stand, yeah, I put it in backwards. It needs to read from this hopper and point into this block. Place a temporary block next to that torch, and then add a sticky piston so it faces away from the block, and then you can remove your temporary block. Next, we need to place 2 hoppers pointing into each other. So let's start with placing a block here. We'll put 1 hopper on top of that. Next hopper pointing into it. We'll take out this hopper and replace it so that the hoppers point into each other. Add a redstone block next to the sticky piston. And in the hopper below that, add 52 items of your choice. In this case, I'm going to use iron nuggets. Now, let's place a repeater pointing into the hopper underneath the brewing stand. Then place a redstone lamp and 2 blocks of smooth stone behind it. Place redstone dust on the block right behind the repeater, and then add a comparator pointing into the redstone dust. Now, place a block between the comparator and the hopper. This will allow the comparator to read whatever is in this hopper. Now, back behind our timer, let's add 4 blocks in an L shape, and then add a block to the corner. Place a comparator pointing into the block at the corner of the L, and then a repeater pointing out of it, and this should be on 4 ticks. After the repeater, place a sticky piston pointing up. Next, place an observer on top of the sticky piston so that the face is pointing towards the repeater. Now add 2 blocks behind the sticky piston. Place a repeater on 4 ticks behind the observer, and then add a block behind it. Now come to the front of the machine and put a line of temporary blocks. Place 4 droppers against the blocks pointing out, and then you can remove the temp blocks. Now place a line of hoppers pointing into the hopper that is going into the brewing stand. Cover the hoppers, and then add a line of redstone dust along the top of the droppers and on the corner block that this repeater is pointing into. Now come to the front of the machine, and on the block next to the droppers, place a button. And with that, the machine is done. If you'd like, you could add signs to this to label the bits and bobs so that you know what it is when you come back to it later and try to remember how this thing is supposed to work. Now that the build is done, let me show you how this thing works. First, add blaze powder to the brewing stand. Then add some water bottles to this double chest. Next, we're going to add our ingredients to these droppers. So we'll start by putting nether wart in the first one. Let's put golden carrots in the second one. So say we wanted to make an invisibility potion, for example. So then we would also need to add fermented spider eye. And if we wanted to make it a splash potion, we could add gunpowder into the last modifier box, this last dropper here. The idea is that you've got your wort, you've got your main ingredient, whatever that's going to be, and then your modifiers. So because we're going to do a splash potion of invisibility, we've got our spider eyes and our gunpowder. You could, of course, if you want to make splash potions of night vision, just take out the spider eye. Or if you don't want to be splash potions, take out the gunpowder and put in redstone, for example. This makes this system really, really flexible. Now, to get started, make sure this lever is up, so it's unpowered, and then press this button to start. That will trigger the droppers and send the ingredients into our hopper line. So you can see, well, our last 3 ingredients, because the nether wart is already here in the brewing stand starting to brew the potions. So what will happen is this will then feed each of these items into the brewing stand and then into the potions. So here we have an awkward potion, and in just a moment, once the carrot is finished being processed, now we're going to have our potions of night vision. Then comes the fermented spider eye, which will turn it into invisibility, and then the gunpowder for splash. This system will run automatically until this chest is full. Actually, it's technically till this hopper is full. Or it will go until you're out of water bottles. It will also stop if you're out of blaze powder. Now, if you need to turn the machine off, just flip this lever down. Now, it won't stop the current batch that's being brewed, right? All of these ingredients will still go through and this will happen. But what does get blocked is new water bottles will not get sent into the brewer. So that will effectively turn the machine off. When you're ready to start brewing again, like you've refilled your ingredients or maybe swapped them out or whatever, just flip this back on and you'll be good to go as soon as the current batch is done. So that's how it all works. I want to dive into the details and show you how this machine is working. If you don't care about that, that's cool. Skip ahead to the next section where I talk about the limitations. This system is controlled by this hopper. This is where all of our ingredients are that feed into the brewing stand. The comparator sees that and sends a signal over to this sticky piston. When it gets power, it pushes this redstone block over, starting our timer. Once our system has ingredients in this hopper, our timer starts, and this comparator sees that we have items in this hopper here. It sends a signal out, which lights this handy-dandy redstone lamp, but more importantly, it lights this repeater, which locks the hopper. This is what keeps all of our potions from getting sucked out of the brewing stand before we can actually do any sort of brewing. Once the last brewing ingredient is out of this hopper, you can see the redstone block retracts. When it's retracted, it allows all of the items to feed back into this hopper here. When that happens, this comparator turns off, which then retracts this piston and brings this observer down. The reason we have 52 items in this timer is that's how long it takes approximately for these potions to brew. Now, when that timer runs out, watch what happens. There, you see that observer drop, and also I got pushed over by the redstone. Well, what happened is that triggered a pulse through this repeater into this block, and ultimately across all of this redstone up here, and activates these droppers. And that's what sends our next round of ingredients into this hopper to feed the brewing stand. Now, as I said, I found 52 items in this works beautifully. If for some reason you were finding that your potion ends up into this chest before it has a chance to process the last ingredient, just add a couple of extra items to this timer and you should be good to go. Now that we've gone over how this machine works, let's talk about some of the limitations. First off, because of the way this timer works, the system doesn't work with potions that use a single ingredient, such as weakness potions. However, it will work if you add a modifier such as gunpowder to make splash potions of weakness. Next, it's not so much a weakness as something to keep in mind, is there's nothing in this machine to keep track of your ingredients. So if you run out of nether wart or whatever your main ingredient is, this system is just going to keep on trying to make potions. And because of that, it might end up jamming up or making things you don't like. So keep an eye on your stock and just be sure that you have enough potion ingredients to make whatever it is you're wanting to make. And finally, for all of you happy Bedrock users, this redstone does work on Bedrock mostly. The problem you have with Bedrock is it has this weird random update order, okay? So if you get back here and look at these hoppers when you're after your droppers fire, what you might find is your items are in the wrong order in this hopper, okay? Now, for a lot of the potions, that's not going to matter, okay? But if for some reason you end up with fermented spider eye as your first ingredient instead of the golden carrot, what you end up with is weakness potion, and that can't mix with anything. So you could end up jamming your system. So you might be able to mitigate that by putting this fermented spider eye as the last ingredient. I'm not entirely sure. I didn't test that extensively. So just be aware, this can work on Bedrock, but it might break on Bedrock because of the way it handles its updates. So you have been warned. And that will do it for me today. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope this is useful for you in your worlds. If you like this, of course, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know if there's something else you want to see. Maybe I'll be able to figure something out. And until next time, be excellent to each other. And this is Music Free Gaming, signing off.